Prior to today's session, we asked our participant Marcus to fulfil a self-assessment sheet that he was introduced to. On this sheet, the skill components of the front crawl stroke were identified. Marcus then was asked to rate himself in accordance with those skills in relation to a criteria which looked at body position, arm action, leg action, breathing and timing, as well as other components.
This criteria and scale are representative of a competitive swimmer. We asked our participant to assess their ability on a 1 to 5 scale in reference to the predetermined criteria for the highlighted skill components. This scale represented the level of consistency or margin for error within the participant's ability to perform the highlighted skill components for the front crawl stroke. The 1 to 5 scale is also represented as a percentage, acting as an indicator allowing the participant to review their own progress, record improvements and the revision of goals as appropriate. It also aids the external coach to confirm the participant's self-assessment by defining and tracking the progression of an independent learner.
The particular aim of today was looking at arm action and body position in relation to the medial rotation of the arm, entry into the water, the catch phase, the pull phase and the push phase of the stroke, as these in the self-assessment were identified by Marcus as areas of error and mistake. The particular drills used today were looking at to encourage Marcus to become more of an independent learner, teaching him to use feedback to identify errors and flaws in his performance and record improvement.
Here we can see Marcus performing the whole stroke. In relation to the highlighted skill components in the self-assessment process, we can identify a number of technical errors in arm action and body position. Marcus himself rated these particular criteria as having high margins of error when assessing his own performance. Flat body position in the water would limit the rotation of the shoulder and hips, crossing over the arms at the shoulder line, flat arm entry and slapping of the water, and inward pull and overcompensation leading to loss of balance and water tension. The first drill was a head lead kick drill, first stationary, then rotating, looking at providing Marcus with feedback that would help him to correct his flat body position on the water with limited rotation of the shoulder and hips. The drill emphasized decreasing frontal drag and resistance, improving streamlined body position and rotation from the hips. I asked Marcus to identify and describe the internal and external source of feedback he got from performing the drill. I then asked him to use the feedback to record any improvements he had felt during the performance of that drill.
I felt a lot of wave pressure on the tops of my shoulders, a lot of resistance on my shoulders and my chest and on my head. Then when we did the second drill where I started to rotate in the water, I felt a lot less resistance on the shoulders and especially on the chest, as it was keeping myself more flat in the water rather than arching my back. And also my hips felt a lot more stable in the water as well when I rotated those.
Good, good. Definitely, in the second part of the drill you were definitely a lot more streamlined and there was less resistance from the water, with the emphasis of the power coming from your hips and a lot of balance work.
Now that Marcus had identified that rotating of the shoulder and the hips reduced frontal resistance and drag, and also help maintain a elevated and balanced body position in the water, I looked to incorporate the arm action in a fingertip drag drill, which again promoted rotation of the shoulder as well as high elbows in the recovery and preventing a premature hand entry into the water through the arm extension. Again, I asked Marcus to identify and describe feedback and how it applied to his performance.
I felt like both the drills allowed me to stretch out a lot more and get a lot more reach in the water, and because of that it meant that I could rotate a lot easier in the water whilst keeping a flat balanced position rather than being flat in the water and not getting that stretch that I had before, that I couldn't get before.
Was there any
also,
was there any other sources of feedback? You know, how it felt in the water? How did your body feel?
Well, I felt like I could go a lot faster through the water because I was getting a lot less resistance in the places that I was before.
Good.
So that's definitely
brilliant.
the bonuses there.
Right, we're on to the next drill.
Next we looked at combating Marcus's tendency to cross over the shoulder line through the extension of the arm and the catch phase of the stroke, leading to loss of balance, increased front resistance as the body is not streamlined, and loss of water tension in the catch. First part of the drill was a single arm stroke, looking at encouraging Marcus to rotate at the shoulder and extend into the stroke, focusing on getting a good water tension on the catch phase and also having the arm slightly wider. Next was a catch-up phase, providing a physical barrier for the arm action, also concentrating on keeping the arm as streamlined as possible. Finally, 6 for 6, emphasizing the correct body position, arm action, and keeping in a streamlined position, feeling for the water tension through the catch. This was followed by a discussion in which Marcus explained how the feedback helped him to implement actions as necessary.
It was a single arm pull. I was able to focus on one arm at a time, and that helped me not cross over as much and kept a wider arm entry. And this also helped with my pull down with increased tension in the water. The second drill was the catch-up drill. This also helped me not cross over as much because I got a physical feel of the other arm if I crossed over too far.
Yeah, if you over rotated.
Yeah, so there wasn't any rotation problems, which helps with my balance as well and the stretching out. The third drill, the 6x6 kick, helps with my shoulder rotation and my body rotation and able to stretch out further, and it brought both of my arms together as well so I could work and it was closer to the full stroke kind of feel. This helped with the water tension as well on both parts of the pull down phase and stopping me from over sweeping on the pull down phase.
Yeah. Did you also feel like you're travelling through the water a lot easier?
I did. I felt like there was a lot less drag on my shoulders and my chest, which allowed me to go a lot faster. It felt a lot faster. Definitely, it was a lot easier to go through the water.
The final drill sequence aimed to correct Marcus's inward pull through the pull phase and catch phase of the stroke, leading to loss of balance and water tension as well as streamline. To improve the efficiency of his stroke, we used an EVF drill, which is early vertical forearm within the water, promoting correct arm position and the feeling of water tension and propulsion on the arm. The participant was encouraged to close their eyes during the performance to emphasize and magnify the feedback they were getting from the drill. The pull buoy was incorporated to isolate the legs and also work on core and balance stability within the water. Marcus was asked to review any feedback in relation to his performance within the drill, in particular to any earlier feedback or criteria.
On the EVF drill, on the first part of the drill where I had the kickboard in front of me, I felt that my arm on the catch phase that we were practicing, I felt like I was getting a lot more lift on the water and getting a lot more of the correct grip, kind of like a grip on the water.
Good.
So I had a good pull down phase there. And this slightly helped me with my balance as well with having the kickboard in front of me. Then progressed to the second part.
Sorry to interrupt you. What about having your eyes closed, mate? Whereabouts how did the water feel when your eyes were closed?
Well, having the eyes closed meant that I was more concentrating on the feel of the water rather than the visual aspects. This meant that on the pull down part I was getting a lot more kind of like lift on the right areas of my hands and my forearm, so I was feeling a lot more pressure there, which is good, as opposed to having a lot of pressure underneath my arm and on my biceps. So that helps me a lot.
Okay, so in regards to the hand position, starting position, hand position, start position, what kind of muscles did that help you to employ? Was that more of what kind of a stroke was that? Was it stronger or weaker?
It felt a lot stronger because I could feel like I was using a lot more of my pectorals and my triceps especially, which is the most important muscles to be using, as opposed to when I was before dropping my elbow, and this was forcing me to only use part of my triceps rather than employing my shoulder as well.
Good, right. And how did you progress with the drill?
The next part of the drill was where we took the kickboard away. This then I had my arm stretched out, my alternate arm stretched out, which helped me with my balance in the water. And this, yet again, I got the same kind of feedback as before, except I was a lot less reliant on the kickboard because it wasn't there.
Yeah.
The third part of the drill was the catch-up phase, where we progressed on to catch-up. From this, I definitely felt like I was a lot more balanced in the water compared to us before, where I had a lot of the crossover problems. The pull-down phases, my arm was in the correct position, I had a high elbow and I was using the right muscles again. And this also helps with my shoulder rotation as well, making sure that I'm stretching out far enough and not keeping myself flat in the water. So I felt a lot less drag in the places I don't want it to be, so on my chest and my shoulders.
Following the session, the participant completed a post-interview in which he was asked to justify any progression or recorded improvements in his ability in relation to the self-assessment criteria. The participant drew on knowledge of feedback within constrained practices to identify methods of improvement, such as alterations in arm action and body position, leading to the outcome of a more streamlined body position within the water, confirmed by the internal feedback sources of water resistance and drag. This demonstrates the participant's increasing understanding of the components that make up the skill, ability to identify sources of feedback, self-correction during and after the performance. All of the above are examples of higher order thinking skills and improvements as an independent learner. When applied to competitive club, participants will be introduced to both the self-assessment criteria and scale for tracking an independent learner, repeating the earlier process of self-assessing their own ability in accordance with the skill components and scale. Over a predetermined time, participants are introduced to a number of constrained drills on a weekly basis. These practices would reflect the level of consistency or margin for error on the individual participants' highlighted initial self-assessment. The participant is then responsible for repeating these constrained drills, tracking their own progress, recording improvements, and diagnosing faults. It is the participant's ability as an independent learner that is assessed in the preliminary review, dependent on the participant's understanding of skill components within the constrained drills, as well as their ability to identify and interpret sources of feedback, will indicate their level of improvement of that specific skill and as an independent learner. The review will be repeated a number of times over a predetermined time scale. The role of a coach is as a consultant to the participant. It is a justification provided by the participant of perceived improvement that is important. The coach only acts as to clarify the independent learner's decisions, offering aid only when specifically needed, such as prompting the identification of feedback, exemplifying visual or auditory feedback with the use of an analogy. The revision of own goals is predominantly dictated by the participant, with reduced influence from the coach as a participant progresses as an independent learner. Neil's model has been applied throughout this process. Its approach to skill acquisition that applies the constraints of the learner, the environment, and the task in its attempts to encourage the performer to identify solutions to the movement problems. This approach is reflected in the drills demonstrated earlier. Therefore, an important pedagogical role of coaches and teachers is to discover the way to manipulate informational constraints on the learners during practice. This strategy forces the performer to explore a variety of information sources which will enhance their performance. Increasing focus to relevant perceptual information sources in constraint-led drills is seen as the process by which the performer's perceived ability is enhanced during the learning process, and it is the identification of these sources/feedback that reflects the performer's development as an independent learner. For this reason, some have proposed that the major goal for learners is to actively seek and pick up perceptual information to support goal-directed activities. Such manipulations could act as an instructional constraint, that is, a constraint that is imposed by the teacher or coach to selectively guide the learner's search towards more relevant perceptual sources to maximize development. However, as the performer develops as an independent learner, they will begin to identify relevant information and feedback on their own, only referring back to the coach for guidance as well as clarification of perceived improvements.